Welcome back, dear participants, to the second deep dive for today. We are very happy to welcome Tim Reeve with us, Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer of Victoria and Albert Museum. And still with us is Manouchehr Shamsrizi, co-founder of Game Lab Berlin at the Hermann von Helmholtz Zentrum für Kulturtechnik at the Humboldt University of Berlin. We are very happy to have you with us. Just to remind you, there are 3 ways to include your questions. So the audience questions, that it's your chance to ask your question. So there are 3 ways how we can actually include them. You can participate via direct audio in this webinar by clicking the raise your hand icon. You can also ask the question in writing in the chat of this webinar, or you use our online form at campus.re-publica.com. If you're following from our website or YouTube, there is also the chance to include those questions at campus.re-publica.com. So let's dive in, and I would say, Manouchehr, you have the floor.
Thank you. And once again, I'm trying to be short and provocative, as we have been asked to start the discussion this way. But I will fail in doing so because I was highly moved by what Tim shared with us. To say so, for example, the connection between the role of the museum in the future as a part of the transformation of public institutions in general. I tend to believe that that is overseen aspect, that the transformations in many ways, moral obligations, transparency, accountability, inclusiveness, that now the museums face, that's the same other institutions, not only, but mostly from the public sphere face, which means that there might be unheard neighborhoods and potential collaborations with part of the public administration still seen by many museums, to say so, as an enemy, maybe, because that's where the money and the grants come from. But they really might, in the way Tim described it, be partners, really. I also have been moved by the idea of museums being in the happiness business. Having an original background in political philosophy, my first thought was, is he talking about happiness or is he talking about the business of joy? I'm looking forward to learn more by Tim on this, because of course there is a difference, and in the end he talked about joy as a dimension of the experience in the museum as well. But generally, to maybe point that out, I was reminded of a discussion we have in the world of the cultural techniques of video games for many years now, where there's a differentiation between serious gaming, a very European approach. I built an experience that has from the very beginning in its DNA the aim of serving something beyond happiness and fun, and the much more successful approach that is discussed as gaming for impact, which is a broader approach, accepting the fact that something might lead to happiness in the first place, and you still are able to build on build around that happiness a real life serious impact, to say so. I also very much agree with what Tim said, and I'm trying to quote that the critics of the distinction entertainment versus education that are saying if you are doing both, you are serving the educated elite only. That is a very valid critic of criticism, because I believe the opposite is true. Just as we heard, why should a more experience-driven approach not enable people who might not be part of the educated cultural elite to come? It might be the opposite. I would argue it's the opposite. And final point, so you see, it's not very provocative in this case, I'm afraid. The idea that museums should connect with issues and agendas of the real world, and do so by building up on research and scholarly work as well, while still serving in the happiness business. I agree with that as well. and I look forward to visit Victoria and Albert next time to learn how that works in the practical implementation.
Well, so there's a lot of agreement, obviously.
I'm
so
sorry.
Maybe, yeah, that's no problem at all. We already have a first question coming in by Giovanna, who asks, Tim, how do you see the future of the so-called blockbuster shows in the post-COVID world? Can they coexist with social distancing and time slots? How could you make up for that shortfall in funding at the V&A, for instance?
What a great question. And a question that we have asked ourselves many, many times over the last few months. I mean, I don't like the term blockbuster. I mean, I think even that term sort of implies some sense that it's not sort of substantial and it's not a kind of a serious kind of exhibition. But there's no doubt that we've been very successful in part because we have been able to hit this sort of sweet spot between scholarship and entertainment with some of the exhibitions I referred to earlier, and that kind of model, if you like, that business model does require really substantial audiences of 300,000 to 500,000 visitors coming through an exhibition, and right now it is very difficult to imagine how that will ever be possible again. So we will have to adapt. I think it will come back, but it will take years rather than months to come back. And we're looking at a number of ways that we can do things differently to capture our audience. For example, as we've done with our kimono exhibition during lockdown, having a much better digital version of that exhibition, obviously kind of free to access during lockdown, but maybe in due course as our post-COVID landscape looks clearer, working on virtual exhibitions that we feel you could also charge for in the way that you could charge for exhibitions here. But the really important thing for the V&A is to see an exhibition as part of the overall program of the V&A, that somehow, for most people, for lots of people, their access point to the V&A might be through an exhibition, or it might be through a first date with somebody who goes on to be their life partner, or it might be because they're meeting somebody for a business lunch in our members' room. But it's just that the coming into the building, the act of coming into the building at whatever touch point might then start a journey which leads to deeper and deeper engagement with the breadth of our collection and the depth of our kind of research. So that's a really big question for us to look at. The only thing I just wanted to kind of use as a prop, just in case I run out of time, is this. This is a trophy that we won. We're kind of rather proud of at the V&A. This was the Alexander McQueen exhibition, and it was the award for outstanding achievement presented by the Themed Entertainment Association in Los Angeles. The exhibition judged to represent the highest standards of excellence and achievement associated with the arts and sciences of themed entertainment. So museums can hit this sweet spot, can achieve this kind of balance. The question about how we continue to do that in the future, I think, is an open one at this point.
Well, Manouchehr, maybe you can share your opinion on how games can actually help with that. Is there a way to bring games into the museum? And
sure, for sure.
Well, that's a long story in itself, but I believe it goes back to our discussion with Robin a few minutes ago. It is also in line with what Tim said. Many aspects of gaming as a cultural technique can, by definition, because it's digital, it's utopian to say so, it's not bounded by physical reality, can help to make the experience not starting with entrance to the building and ending with leaving the building, but it can start to say so with an augmented reality preview once you got the ticket at home. It can continue something the Game Lab is working on with many museums, including the Humboldt Forum, is a gamified dialogue with objects, so you can talk to pieces of art. So many of the cultural techniques of gaming can help in expanding experience. It's less the technology, I would argue. It's more the understanding of interaction that Tim also mentioned. To make it concrete, I'm now not only looking forward to visit V&A at some point, but maybe in the members' room we can make sure it's not only elder British gentlemen meeting for lunch, but maybe a short but nice esport tournament would be appropriate to introduce a new audience.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we did do a brilliant exhibition on video games and video game culture and video games as a cultural phenomenon, but also as an extraordinary business and means of engaging with kind of Gen Z. I mean, it was a great exhibition to do. It was incredibly successful and is on tour around the world. And I think for most people, their most memorable learning experiences from their formal education are through fun or through play. You know, everyone remembers the teacher that managed to bring a dry subject to life through a different mode of transmission, a different form of kind of teaching. So I think you're kind of right. And with all of these things, it is about achieving a balance that one doesn't want to go down a particularly kind of narrow path in terms of media, that different subjects for a different audience at a different place and at a different time require different media and different modes of engagement. And as I said in my presentation, you know, we are lucky enough to be a big enough museum in terms of space and collections, not to be all things to all people, but to really explore lots of different ways of doing things. And as you will have heard from Gus Casely-Hayford, our new director of V&A East, with that particular institution, to build a new institution right in the heart of a community for whom the V&A is not part of their lives. It's not a relevant institution, even though we are a public institution and a civic institution. There is a part of London that really hasn't had the opportunity to engage with us at all. So building an institution in their backyard as a much more direct means of engagement, and to build an institution that reflects their hopes and their dreams is also a hugely important part of what we're trying to do in the future.
I don't see any further questions by the audience at the moment. So I would like to bring this deep dive to an end. Thank you very much for taking your time and for bringing in your input. Thank you very much for taking the time, especially to Tim, who is leaving us now and who's going to enjoy the rest of the program, I hope. Thank you to Manouchehr, who will still be with us for the next deep dive at 6:30 with Marie-Cécile Sinsou, whose sprint will begin just after a short break. So I hope you have fun with the Mars program and see you in the next deep dive.